Hi everyone, I am the Swedish Storyteller and I'm kind of new here on YouTube. I've uploaded some scary stories from Sweden, but today I want to try something different. In today's video, I'm going to read 2 stories about the Wendigo, a monster from the Native American folklore who roams the forests and feasts on human flesh. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, subscribe and give a like. And let me know in the comments what kind of stories you want to hear next. Now, come and sit by the fire and listen, because now it's story time. Story number 1. When I was in my first year of college, I lived with my mom. My dad had passed the year before, and we moved out of the house shortly after. I was glad because I have suffered a lot of paranormal trauma growing up there, and was glad to get out. One night I was driving home on Highway 111 north after youth group, and I saw something that still bewilders me. It was lightly raining that night. Mist crawled across the road from the cow fields on either side. The lights from the few gas stations nearby were reflected in the wet asphalt. I was driving about 3 car lengths behind a dark minivan with nobody else in sight on the roads. All of a sudden I saw the van swerve to miss something in the middle of the road. I was going too fast and the road was too slick to miss it. All of a sudden I saw, framed in my headlights and silhouetted in the glowing red brake lights of the van speeding away, a tall muscular man with the upper shoulders and head of a buck. It was like a minotaur, but a deer head instead of a bull, and glowing red eyes. I clinched and braced for impact, and then passed right through the figure. It was like it dissolved right into the mist. I am used to swerving to miss deer at night, but I should have nailed this thing on the driver's side. Nothing. I was too afraid to look in the rear view mirror as I gassed it and sped home. I was only a couple of miles away, which was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. I raced in the door and locked it behind me. I told my mom, who laughed it off, but was disconcerted at my pale, clammy expression. I only later found in research a being described like what I saw. The Wendigo. A Native American legend that was terrifying to me as a child. But I had never heard it described like this. I had never heard of any creature like this until that night on a dark Highway 111 that I will never forget. Story number 2. When I was young, I often spent parts of summer with my grandmother in her home out in the country. It was my favorite place in the world, and I always looked forward to the week-long stays of gardening, baking, late-night fires with s'mores, and ghost stories, and enjoying having my grandmother all to myself. There was a pond not far from our house, where I would sometimes go to swim. It was home to quite a few frogs, and at night they made the most incessant noises. I complained to my grandmother only once, saying I couldn't enjoy the night breeze with all the racket. She took me on her lap and told me a story about an old man and woman who lived near a lake. The old man couldn't stand the singing of the frogs, but his wife told him that they kept the Wendigo away. and to harm them would be unwise. Well, he didn't listen, and set about methodically catching all the frogs on the lake. It was a process that took some time, but he did not stop until he had rid the lake of the pesky amphibians. That night, without the protection of the frogs, he and his wife were slaughtered by the Wendigo, a vicious, whip-like demon creature with elongated fingers ending in razor-sharp talons and rows of silver teeth as thin and keen as needles. I wrote it off as another of her ghost stories, though she seemed more serious than usual about it. I never complained about the frogs again, mostly because I grew to enjoy them and put the story out of my mind. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it until it came up this past spring in a Native American literature class I was taking in college. The mention of the Wendigo sparked that old memory of my grandmother's story. I thought she had made up the word. I didn't realize there were stories about it, originating in Algonquian legends. Eager to connect something from my childhood to the topic, I googled it, only to find that my grandmother had apparently been mistaken. There was nothing I could find about the story she had told me, nor any references of frogs providing protection from the Wendigo. In fact, the Wendigo of legends seems very little like my grandmother's version. They were said to be insatiable, craving human flesh, and sometimes created from the forms of people who had resorted to cannibalism to survive. Descriptions varied, but they sounded almost nothing like my grandmother's boogeyman version. I actually chuckled as I read it, almost a bit embarrassed by how badly my grandmother had messed up the original tale. I changed residence this summer, moving to a newly built 1,000 square foot on each side duplex on the edge of town. The other side is to be occupied by my landlady, who'd had a place built. However, she isn't scheduled to move the rest of her stuff in and begin living there for a couple of weeks. She is waiting for her lease to end. Even though my new place is only a few minutes from the edge of town, it feels much more isolated. I enjoy the seclusion of my new home and its proximity to a more natural setting. I'm surrounded by woods, and from the patio I can even see a pond beyond the carefully landscaped lawn, which is meticulously carved out from the surrounding woodlands. Just like the pond near my grandmother's house, the frogs have put up a ferocious racket lately. I prefer not to pay to run my air conditioning if I can help it, so I have every window open to catch a breeze. That means that I can hear them as clearly as if I were standing on the water's edge. It took a few days to get used to the noise, but I am fine now, just like I was those summers when I was young. In fact, the noise has been comforting for me during the stress of the move. Tonight is different. I find myself standing in my living room, staring at where the pond is, though I can't see it in the dark. The air is eerily still and oppressively warm, but all my windows are shut, and I feel impossibly cold. I'd long since convinced myself that my grandmother's story has been a silly tale, a twisting of an old legend by irreverent storytellers, but for some reason I have the most overwhelming sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. Leaving my house means braving the darkness beyond my home, but I don't know if I'm going to be safe in here either. The frogs have stopped singing.